past few years, we've seen a rise in stars from the 2000s talking about their toxic times in the spotlight, with icons such as Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and Amanda Bynes going through extremely public struggles. Mischa Barton is another of the stars who had an absolutely meteoric rise to stardom and unfortunately had a very public downfall too. In this video, I want to take a look at how Mischa's experience was mirrored in The OC, the hit TV show that she starred in from 2003 to 2006. Just as there is now a greater awareness surrounding the treatment of stars in the media, there is also an awareness of what it means to write female characters nowadays in a way that allows them to be flawed but to still have agency. Often, when watching TV or reading books from 10 plus years ago, we can see traits given to female characters that seem outdated and that are a clear product of their time. I'm going to compare Mischa's trajectory to her OC character Marissa Cooper's trajectory in this video, to highlight how the treatment of the 2000s It Girl pervaded both fictional spaces and reality. I will be unable to avoid spoilers throughout this video, but if you do wish to watch an OC-related video that's spoiler-free, I also have a style analysis of the show up on my channel that I'll link down below. Firstly, I'll give a quick overview of Mischa's career before landing the role of Marissa Cooper. Mischa began acting at just 8 years old, but initially found parts in off-Broadway shows and independent movies, playing smaller parts than she would go on to play in The OC. Her performances as a child were met with critical praise, but she was not a child star on the level of Mary-Kate and Ashley or Lindsay Lohan, for example. The fame that she was met with when she became Marissa Cooper was unlike anything she had experienced before, and she has since said that she was not at all prepared for it. Mischa was still a teenager when she was offered the role of Marissa, whilst her co-stars Rachel Bilson, Adam Brody, and Ben McKenzie were all in their 20s. Mischa recently wrote an essay for Harper's Bazaar on her experience of being so prominent in the industry at such a young age, which is a very interesting read, and I'll link it down below. The naivety and innocence that Mischa obviously had is translated in her performance of Marissa in The OC, so let's start looking at how her real life seemed to influence her characters and vice versa. We are first introduced to Marissa as a mysterious, alluring character who is clearly the It Girl of The OC. She welcomes newcomer Ryan Atwood into her circle, and we begin to see that there is more to her than there initially seems. Marissa's beauty is immediately the most notable thing about her, and this impacted her influence both on screen and off. When The OC first premiered, Mischa's fame skyrocketed almost instantly. She became a teen style and beauty icon, gracing the cover of every teen magazine and being invited to every exclusive Hollywood event there was. She instantly joined the ranks of Hilary Duff, Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, etc., with this popularity coming to her almost overnight. This was very much in keeping with Marissa's fictional popularity too, as she is introduced to the audience as the most beautiful, rich, and enviable character, with an amazing house, a popular boyfriend, and a lot of influence over her school peers. Marissa was painted as the golden girl at the beginning of the show, but she was also given an edge that diminished as the show went on. Much to Seth's surprise, Marissa listens to punk music and reads avant-garde literature, showing that there is much more to her than the stereotypical vapid Californian teen. Much like with Marissa, Mischa became a person of interest at this point too, with media outlets scrambling for interviews with her on her career, her interests, and her personal style. Both Marissa and Mischa were given a platform that allowed them to show off who they were, but with both of them, this vanished as the narrative surrounding them changed. I think ultimately it's fair to say that there was nothing out of the ordinary regarding the writing of Marissa's character in Season 1, although some cracks do start to show towards the end of this season. Unlike with Summer's character, who is so obviously included just to be sexualized at the start of the show, Marissa is immediately given more depth. We see hints of familial problems, a drinking issue, and struggles with her relationship, with all of this building a picture that suggests that she doesn't quite have it all, despite appearances. Due to the large amount of episodes in each season, the drama in The OC has a quick turnover, So we see Marissa thrown into successive situations that nowadays may have had a whole season dedicated to them individually. Josh Schwartz, the showrunner, has admitted that he burned through storylines quicker than he ought to, largely due to his inexperience in the industry. Therefore, we see Marissa go through an incredible amount in such a short space of time, with her being given no real room for comedy or lightheartedness, unlike Seth and Summer. That being said, the tragic heroine label hadn't fully fastened itself to Marissa in season 1 yet, nor to Mischa in real life. There was still room for things to turn around at this point, but as we know, that didn't happen. I think the main issues with the writing of Marissa begin to arise when, in season 2, we see that she wasn't allowed to grow at all. Of course, you could argue that there are issues in season 1, with Marissa already showing signs of being a constant damsel in distress for Ryan to rescue, but we do have to remember that the show is almost 20 years old, so of course the way that female leads are written today has changed. But it becomes different when she isn't allowed to change at all, cementing her into a hopeless character who has no chance of changing her circumstances. I obviously won't be able to go into every single plot point that Marissa was involved in, as much as I would like to, but instead I'll try to mention the ones that I thought were most pivotal. Of course, her relationship with Ryan is the standout plot in the show, with all her other relationships inevitably not working because they don't live up to what she had with him. We see her jumping from relationship to relationship, but never truly finding happiness in any of them. Unfortunately, as the show goes on, we stop learning about Marissa as a person, but instead simply see her through the lenses of her relationships, whether these are with boyfriends, girlfriends, family, or friends. Throughout the 3 seasons that Marissa is in, we witness her becoming more and more lost, losing a lot of that it-girl spark that she had in the first few episodes of season 1. Another recurring theme is her substance abuse. This rears its head in the very first episode, with her going on to overdose on the group's trip to Tijuana. However, this is depicted in a way that seems like it's simply acting out, and seems less like she is paving her way to a life as an alcoholic. Again, this changes in the 2nd and 3rd seasons, as we see her substance use get increasingly out of control. She has no handle on any area of her life, and unlike when Seth, Summer, or Ryan are struggling, she is given no reprieve in her storylines. I just want to mention the parallels between Marissa's life and Mischa's here again, as public attitude towards both of them began to change. As I mentioned earlier, both on-screen and off, there was an it-girl aura surrounding them both. However, as is true of our society with stars throughout time, the tide often turns against even the most adored figures, as people begin waiting for their downfall. People often don't like to see others who seem to have it all, and this was certainly the case with both Marissa and Mischa. Marissa becomes known for her instability, as does Mischa at this point. I don't want to focus too much on the struggles that Mischa had personally at this time in her life, but I do think it's interesting to note that as Marissa's partying, drinking, and general carelessness increased, so did Mischa's off-screen. The lines became very blurred between fiction and reality here, as the narrative surrounding them both became increasingly negative. Unfortunately, the height of Mischa's fame came at a particularly toxic time in the media, in which anyone's relationships, weight, and general appearance were fair game to rip into. Media outlets seemed to be waiting for her to act recklessly, being more interested in the mistakes she made as opposed to her style tips when she first became famous. Back to Marissa, you can't mention her character without talking about the iconic shooting scene. This was a pivotal moment in TV history, and is probably still the most iconic moment from the show to date. This follows a tumultuous story arc for Marissa, in which she deals with sexual assault. This is one of the clearest examples of how a sensitive storyline like this was dealt with very differently back in the early 2000s, as we see Marissa's struggles essentially be brushed under the rug. Marissa seems to be quite a universally disliked character, with many fans of the show finding her annoying and repetitive. But, as seen in arcs like this, she really isn't given much support to allow her to flourish and change. It's very rare that the lead of a teen show will be given no redeeming storylines or opportunities to better herself, But, as the show went on, this seemed to be the case with Marissa. She is involved in drama after drama, with her shooting Trey highlighting how the writers wanted to maximize on the craziness. As I mentioned before, with her drinking and her relationships, everything goes further downhill for her after this, and at no point does it look as though she is going to be able to turn her life around. I don't want this video to get too long, so lastly I'll just mention the way that Marissa's story ended. Marissa's death shocked audiences, and it's still mentioned as one of the most upsetting character deaths of all time. For all her problems and the negative reaction she got from a lot of the audience, there is something so cruel about seeing her life end like this, with audiences not wanting to accept that after everything they'd seen her go through, it was never going to get better for her. All hope, beauty, talent, and prospects that we see her start out with vanish in an instant, and it's no wonder that there was backlash against this. Not only did her death mean the end of seeing Marissa on screen, it also meant the end of seeing Seth, Ryan, and Summer as they had been before. The whole tone of the show was forced to change. I personally do like Season 4, as it was refreshing to see less heavy drama after Season 2 and 3's overload of it. But there's no denying that the OC universe just wasn't the same once Marissa was gone. Again, to link this back to Mischa's real life, it's interesting to see what the writers viewed as being the only feasible end for a person like Mischa or Marissa. Not to make a crass comparison between terrible real-life circumstances and a TV show, but the treatment of Mischa and Marissa does make meltdowns on the level of Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes, or tragedies such as the death of Amy Winehouse spring to mind. The early 2000s treatment of the It Girl seemed to be aiming to culminate in as dramatic an end as possible. The constant negative press and hounding by the paparazzi would obviously take its toll, with people strangely seeming to get enjoyment out of watching stars spiral. It's interesting to see how linked Mischa and Marissa became, and since this role still remains her biggest to date, she is often still viewed as a tragic heroine in real life too. It's rare that we see an actor merging their real self with their fictional self so acutely, and the only other example I can think of where this happened is with Taylor Momsen's portrayal of Jenny Humphrey in Gossip Girl. We see Jenny and Taylor's style and attitude morph into one, just as we do with Mischa and Marissa. I think everyone who is a fan of the show is always going to want better for both Marissa and Mischa, and it's sad that it didn't happen. If you made it to this point, thank you so much, and I'd love to hear your favourite or least favourite Marissa moments. I'd also love it if you could like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.